Hey there, fight fans! Today, we're diving into a boxing match that's been buzzing with excitement, the legendary Mike Tyson vs. Jake Paul. Just a couple of years ago, no one took Jake Paul and his skills seriously. The guy was called a jester, a semblance of a boxer, but he paid no attention to the envious and got better with each fight. Now with 9 wins and just 1 loss on his record, many fans have changed their opinion and started to respect Paul. But can the blocker save face when Mike Tyson clashes with him? The youngest heavyweight champion in history, a man whose fights instilled terror and delight in the fans of viewers, one of the most fearsome punches in boxing history, and just a charismatic guy. Iron Mike Tyson bangs the body. Wow, with that up and got his base. Catches him with a right, left foot, and he was down, and he's crowded out. It'll be scored as a knockout. The legend is coming out of retirement again to remind the younger generation what real boxing is.
Hey, I'm Mike Tyson. I'm gonna wave on that and let you know there's a possibility I might come back. But if I do, I'm gonna fight with the spirit of Mao.
Despite bright victories, many fans continue to reproach the problem child for choosing the weakest opponents for himself, and 57-year-old Mike Tyson is considered one of them. If I were them, I wouldn't rush to conclusions. Of course, the legend has long retired and his age, to put it mildly, is quite mature, but writing him off would be a mistake. Perhaps the ruthless knockout artist from the 90s will be the guy who fulfills the dream of boxing fans and puts out the blogger. Whether this happens or not, we will only find out in the fight. But for now, I suggest you enjoy the countdown to the Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul fight. You all remember Mike's tough childhood and subsequent rise inside out, but not everyone knows what happened in his life. After that, in 2005, Tyson suffered his 2nd consecutive loss and decided to officially end his professional career, but returned a year later to have a series of exhibition fights against other veterans.
I don't think I have it anymore because I got the ability to stay in shape, but I don't got the fighting guts, I don't think, anymore.
Unfortunately, the idea failed. After just 1 fight against Corey Sanders, Mike paid off his debts and rode into the sunset, leaving fans puzzled. In the following years, the boxing legend searched for himself and participated in many projects. So in 2008, he starred in the movie The Hangover. In 2012, he built several centers for children from disadvantaged families, and a year later became the co-founder of a boxing promotion named in his honor. Around the same time, Mike was working on his autobiography, for which he even received a Sportshell Award, and the New York Times recognized the book as a bestseller. The champion has been talking about his boxing career with disdain and irritation for a long time.
I can say I bled for garbage. At one time it meant a lot. When you're just a young kid, this is everything to you. But then you realize your priorities change. And you just want your children to be happy and do nice things, and that makes you happy. This is nothing.
Mike held his opinion for a long time, but from the mid-20s, his rhetoric began to change again. He lost weight, gained good physical shape, and started to look much more like his former self, which couldn't but please devoted fans. But no one thought we would see him in the ring again. Well, what kind of boxing can we talk about at 50? As it turns out, we underestimated old Tyson. In 2020, when the whole world was sitting at home, waiting for the pandemic to end, Mike announced his triumphant return in the fight against another sports legend, Roy Jones. The 8-round confrontation between 2 pillars of boxing was scheduled for the fall, with former professional boxers chosen as judges. During the preparation for his triumphant return, Mike met the young YouTube star, Jake Paul, for the first time.
Biggest fight.
Yeah, the biggest ever.
Ever. It's on pace to be the biggest fight ever.
Yes, and we're involved.
We're involved, right?
We're involved. All those big shots, all the biggest athletes in the world, this is the biggest ever.
November 28th. Let's
Lit. Hey, we lit here. We lit at the Tyson Ranch.
Let's talk a bit about Jake. At that time, the guy was just starting his path in boxing and had only 1 fight against another blogger. In fact, the problem child got into fist fighting just because he followed his older brother Logan. It was he who became one of the pioneers of so-called YouTube boxing, that is, semi-professional fights between internet celebrities. Jake wanted to join the trend, so he quickly found an opponent, which marked the beginning of his sports journey. After his first victory, Paul, unexpectedly, realized that he wanted to continue entering the ring, and not because it was popular. He just liked boxing due to the pandemic. It was very difficult to find new opponents, but in the fall, Jake finally managed to organize a fight against a famous basketball player, Nate Robinson. The guys were put against each other in the same boxing event as Tyson and Jones, and that's how Paul ended up in Mike's company.
Protect yourself at all times, ain't that what they say?
You betcha. Oh! And Jake Paul caught Nate Robinson on the way.
Good night, Irene.
Robinson goes face first.
The performances of Iron and the Problem Child left completely different impressions. Robinson tried to take it, Jake with pressure and fussing in the clinch, but as soon as he lost vigilance, the youngster knocked him down with a counterpunch. Nate sprawled on the canvas in a penguin pose, but somehow managed to continue the fight, only to get slipped in the second round. Paul read the opponent's actions and caught him with a terrifying right overhand.
Yeah, I mean, I've been training my ass off, like, for the past year. I'm taking this seriously. There's a long list of opponents that I want. You know, Conor McGregor, Dylan Dennis. I'm gonna knock them both out.
The young blogger showed a very cool fight and gave a great interview, setting further goals. As for the battle of the two veterans, it left exclusively positive emotions. Despite their respectable age, the former champions moved briskly around the ring and didn't slow down throughout all 8 rounds. Jones feinted a lot, tried to outpace and get under Tyson, while Tyson in his style pressed, rocked his body and delivered hard punches, mostly aiming at the body. Everybody punched from Iron Echo throughout the arena, but Jones didn't show it and continued to throw jabs on the retreat. The fight between legends went to a decision, and the judges decided not to offend any of the veterans, so they scored it a draw, but it felt like Tyson had the upper hand.
But despite what everybody said, I was so happy to go to 8 rounds, because everybody knows I can knock somebody out, but everybody don't know I can go 8 rounds and 10 rounds, and that's what I'm more grateful for now than anything. And no knockers. Knockers don't mean nothing. You gotta be able to go the distance.
The viewers were satisfied with what they saw and were happy for the champions, who once again felt young. However, as expected, the venture into boxing turned out to be a one-time action for the veterans, and none of them wanted to return fully, even to the level of exhibition fights, at least at that time. For Jake, though, the path in boxing was just beginning, and all his achievements were still ahead. At the beginning of 2021, he accepted a fight with a former UFC fighter, Ben Askren, who was always famous for his wrestling, but not boxing skills. The outcome of this match was predetermined.
Jean Pascal,
Get my money, Jake! Get my motherfucking money, Jake! Get my motherfucking money, Jake!
It all ended before it even started.
Oh man, I'm gonna do whatever I want, honestly. I feel like I'm living in a dream right now. And honestly, I don't think I'm going to be doing good at these interviews right now because I've had so much on my mind.
Jake nailed the MMA veteran like a mosquito. A quick victory by an impressive knockout not only inspired the blogger, but it also emboldened him and made him feel invincible. For some time, Jake didn't want to think about new fights and an early return to the ring. But as soon as the euphoria passed, the youngster chose a new opponent for himself. Surprisingly this time, the lot came to another former UFC fighter. It was Tyron Woodley once. Tyron was the welterweight champion, whose right overhand literally killed people. The attacks of T. Wood were so destructive that they even injured himself, so he tried not to hit with full force. Unfortunately, by 2021, all this was in the past, and the aging Woodley was released from the UFC after a streak of losses this time. The young man couldn't finish things as quickly. Tyron turned out to be much more resilient than Askren, pressed and defended his head well, and sometimes threatened with punches. Paul in return tried to act like a real boxer, jabbed with his front hand, tried to work on the retreat and hit the body. Overall, the problem child did well and took the rounds, but then his cardio let him down, and Woodley started to catch up. Had the fight been just a couple of rounds longer, the former UFC champion could have left with a victory. But in 8 rounds, Paul did more, so he remained undefeated by the judge's decision.
You know, it was a good shot. He hit me with more shots, but I'm saying like a real shot, one shot. I don't know what they were looking at, but it's all good. Still got the victory. Got 8 rounds under my belt. All my previous opponents went 1 minute.
Like any self-respecting prospect, Paul wanted to raise the level of his opposition, so his next target was the brother of the Gypsy King, young and undefeated Tommy Fury. Unlike the old-timers from MMA, this guy can truly box, and on paper could easily dismantle Jake, but their meeting didn't happen at that time. After announcing the fight, Tommy withdrew due to illness, and the problem child had to look for a replacement. Opponent Tyron Woodley, who really wanted to avenge his upsetting loss, turned out to be the most interested in such a fight. Woodley decided to fundamentally change his tactics from the last fight and work more in the clinch, but Jake wasn't ready for everything. He already knew what to expect from the opponent, so he landed good counters and threw combinations from a distance without eating unnecessary shots. Overall, Paul was fighting on his terms, but it doesn't matter because we didn't see a decision. In the 6th round, Jake blasted Woodley's head with a powerful right hook. This terrifying blow made Tyron fall face down on the canvas for good. And what was Tyson up to in the legend's life? Everything Went Its Course podcasts. Marijuana scuffles with crazy fans. Speaking of podcasts, on one of them, the former champion was asked about potential fights with the Paul brothers, and the legend clearly indicated that he was not against it if there were big paychecks.
Sick of seeing all these Jake Paul fights and all them type shit.
That's the money fight. Those are the fights that make the money. Those guys got 75 million people watching them.
Would you fight one of them?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Man, that'd be crazy. I want to see that. I don't think they'll do that.
They would. That would be a lot of money.
That'd be a lot of money. We got to set that up, man.
Let's get back to Jake. As you can see, his demands increase with each victory, but unfortunately not every fight he asked for was real. Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal physically couldn't enter the ring and tried to kick the guy's butt. So instead, Paul accepted a fight with another UFC veteran and legend Anderson Silva, who decided to return to boxing in his old age, where he had a couple of fights about 20 years ago. Before meeting the blogger, the Spider had already warmed up and won a decision against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. The American dominated almost the entire fight and didn't give the master of mixed martial arts a chance in any aspect. His size and youth dealt with Anderson's experience and technique, and at the end of the meeting, Jake even managed to send the former champion to the canvas with a knockdown. The judges objectively assessed the fight, giving a crushing score in favor of Poles.
To be gigantic. Because first of all, everybody would want to see what.
Let's do it, Jakey!
And we're back to Uncle Mike, who was once again pestered about his fight with Jake. The veteran almost repeated his words verbatim, and then called out the young star. In those days, the problem child was not interested in such a fight. He had brought his record to 6-0, and his popularity had reached its peak. Many wanted to fight this famous guy, who was knocking out MMA veterans left and right, but the tastiest morsel went to only one. At the end of 2022, it was announced that Jake had once again reached an agreement with Tommy Fury's team, and their fight was scheduled for February the 26th. It was time to find out who was stronger, the hereditary boxer and the brother of the celebrity, or the self-taught boxer with explosive power in his hands. The essence of this fight can be suddenly, in the 8th round, did Paul manage to hit Tommy with a jab and score a knockdown, but this episode was just a drop in the ocean at the almost robbing him.
He's exactly the fighter that I expected him to be. I think his combinations were the thing that were a bit more impressive, but more so again, like it was a reflection of my own performance.
The first loss in the career is a bitter pill to swallow, first and foremost mentally, and it took Jake just a couple of months to recover. By spring, he announced his triumphant return, and the opponent for the restless blogger was, who would you think, Nate Diaz, the same guy Jake really wanted to fight, finally left the UFC and signed a contract for the fight. I don't know how fans took such a turn of events, but Paul was definitely thrilled. If you've ever seen how the guy from Stockton conducts his fights, you might as well not even turn on his fight with Jake. At first, Nate, as usual, took a lot of unnecessary hits, delivered little himself, and generally looked like a punching bag. Closer to the end of the bout, Diaz sped up, started working with jabs, and became more active in the clinches, but overall didn't pose much of a threat, and practically gifted the blogger the coveted victory.
Going down, he was standing there, and so I didn't want to burn out and then let him catch a wind and come back with something. So I was being patient, being smart, and was looking for the kill. But at the end of the day, he withstood a bunch of big punches. So
what was more interesting than this fight is the podcast with Mike Tyson, which Jake visited shortly after the victory. The youngster shared his thoughts on future fights and new opponents. He especially wanted to cross gloves of Tommy Fury again, and he didn't even think about Mike as an opponent. At that time, unfortunately, we were not destined to see a new confrontation between Jake and Tommy, as the younger Fury had other plans. Left without a money rematch, Jake suddenly started accepting fights with real pro boxers who, however, were absolute no-names. Each of the guys had decent records, but Paul dealt with them almost easier than with Ben Askren. So I suggest you just enjoy the knockouts. The clear dominance over pro boxers made Jake very proud and called himself the face of boxing, which frankly sounded funny.
Now, though, I want all the biggest names. Like I said, I'm the face of this sport. Truly, who's doing more for boxing than me? I keep on proving myself time and time again.
The problem child won his last fight on March the 2nd, and before we could catch our breath, he immediately announced a new fight. Although I would rather call it not news, but a nuclear bomb, because Paul signed the contract for a fight with Mike Tyson himself. This absolutely insane fight was scheduled for July the 20th, and both sites immediately started to hype it up. Old Man Mike showed part of his training camp, where he demonstrated phenomenal shape and speed of punches, and also warned little Jake about the danger. Paul in return made a parody clip of the craziest interviews in the legend's career. It turned out quite well, but Paul might have to back it up in the ring. Yes, Tyson may be old and not as strong as in his youth, but judging by his serious attitude and wild training, the champ still has gunpowder to put the chatterbox Jake in his place. Whether the legend will win or not, we will find out only in the summer.